Hello, and thank you for reading my post. I'm in a somewhat unique situation and wanted to see if anyone else has gone through something similar. I'm not the victim here by any means. The victims are my husband, my kids, and my parents who are living with the burden of my past sins, for which I am truly sorry. Let me be blunt. 19 months ago, I was caught having an affair with a married neighbor and father of three. I'm a 32-year-old female. My husband is 39, and the neighbor in question was 27 at the time. For confidentiality, I'll call the neighbor Steve, my husband Jim, and myself Amy. As stated, I made a terrible mistake having the affair with Steve, which began a little over 2 years ago. Okay, wait a minute. She said 19 months before all that's when she was caught. So she was caught 19 months ago, but the affair started a little over 2 years ago. While the affair lasted nearly 5 months before we were caught, I was only with Steve physically 4 times in total. I know readers here are not going to believe that, but I swear this to be true. Well, let me tell you something. I don't believe it. Now, to answer questions about my marriage that I know everyone reading this has. Were we having problems? Did I not love my husband? Was I unhappy? The answer is a resounding no to all of those questions. I was completely happy and fulfilled with my marriage, and I loved my husband and our 2 boys, ages 9 and 11, more than anything in the world. Well, I don't buy that because if you're totally happy and fulfilled, you wouldn't be cheating on your husband. I was totally satisfied emotionally, mentally, and physically by Jim. He was all I ever dreamed of and so much more. My misplaced attraction to Steve happened from a deep place that took me back to my first romantic encounter when I was 18. It was a feral attraction, just like my first time. In high school, I dated 4 boys, but nothing serious beyond a quick kiss at the end of the night. In fact, I viewed all those guys as friends since we all grew up together. Then one day, I was invited to go to a barbecue that a friend's parents were having. There, I met Charles. Charles was my friend's cousin. From the first time I saw him, I was taken. At the time, he was 20 and I was 18. From the moment we met, we couldn't keep our eyes off each other. We started talking at the barbecue, and he had to leave for work, so we exchanged numbers. The following day, Sunday, we met for an ice cream in the evening and took a walk. We talked for hours, totally immersed with each other, and just spontaneously started kissing each other. He invited me back to his apartment, and there I had my first experience. So this girl had never been with a guy before, and in fact, she looked at all the guys that she had gone out with as just kind of friends. But then she meets this guy that gets her juices flowing, and within 36 hours, she's having her first experience with the guy. See how easy it is when a woman really wants you. Guys, it was magical, better than I ever dreamed. Something about Charles just excited me and made me want to give him every part of me. To this day, I can't describe it. It was subconscious. I couldn't resist. Beyond the physical relationship we had, absolutely nothing in common. In fact, we were actually incompatible. I broke it off with Charles 11 months later after the passion wore off. A year later, I met my now husband, Jim. Now listen to this. Listen very closely here, guys. While sparks didn't fly early on with him like they did with Charles, over time, I developed a deep love for Jim that was beyond anything I had ever felt. So what that tells you right there is all Jim, who is now her husband, was not her first choice. You don't want to be in that position with a woman. You want to be her first choice. If you're not, you're going to have a potential for problems in that marriage. And we're going to see what happens here. But you can see that the guy that really rocked her world and got her juices flowing was this Charles. It's just very likely that this Charles may not have been a relationship type of guy, or maybe he was a guy that didn't have a bright future, but he was the guy that really turned her inside out. Jim, on the other hand, we're going to find out, is more of a good guy. He's a stable guy. He's a high earner. Those are the kind of men that women want to marry. Whereas Charles, on the other hand, is the kind of guy they want to be with physically. He checked all my boxes, and I knew he was the one. Now she's talking about Jim. We were married a year later, and our marriage had been 13 years of joy until I destroyed it. We were blessed with 2 wonderful boys that are the spitting image of their dad and have his awesome personality. I've given you all of these details because they are relevant to why I started the affair with Steve. Steve and his wife, call her Marcia, moved into our neighborhood. They were the youngest couple in the development and were quickly welcomed by all the neighbors. Surprisingly, my husband and I are the second youngest couple, with the rest being in their 40s, 50s, and a few in their 60s. Steve and Marcia were invited to a neighborhood picnic, and it was there that he and I first locked eyes. It was exactly the same vibe I got when I first locked eyes with Charles at that family barbecue so long ago. So here's another guy that gets her juices flowing. Inside. The next time I locked eyes with Steve was at the car dealership where he worked in finance. We were in the market for a new SUV, so at the picnic when my husband found out Steve worked at the dealership, they started talking. We went the following week to look at cars. Steve made sure the salesman gave us a good deal, and Steve got us great financing. Throughout the closing process, Steve and I were making eye contact with each other, but my husband didn't notice. Isn't that terrible? That is just disgusting. A few days later, I had to bring the vehicle back into the dealership to have mud flaps installed, and it was there that Steve and I had our first inappropriate meeting. Now, when I first read this, I was thinking, oh no, don't tell me that she did it with this guy at the dealership during the daytime. And that's not the case. You're going to see. When he saw me in the lounge, he came out to greet me. He asked me to come back to his office as he had some additional information about the financing to discuss. We sat down, and he got coffee for the both of us, and we started chatting, just like I did with Charles. He then blurted out and told me that he wanted to speak to me alone to discuss how he was feeling about me. He said he felt such a vibe and said he saw me glaring at him. I told him I feel something, but it's wrong. He said he knew it was wrong, but didn't care. He wanted me. Fast forward to the following morning when we had our first intimate engagement at his house after our kids went to school and our spouses left for work. Oh my gosh. By the way, my Jim has a good job and Marcia is an LPN, a licensed practical nurse. As I stated, Steve and I only had physical relations 4 times during the entire 5-month period. There was absolutely no love connection between us, as I loved Jim and Steve loved Marcia. What we had was just physical, and I have to be honest, the physical part was not as good as what I had with my husband. Not even close. But it was forbidden and therefore thrilling and dangerous, I guess. Looking back now, I think being a stay-at-home mom for 11 years made me desperate for the attention I was getting from this attractive younger man. I just thought I could have this secret adventure for a while and still maintain a loving and fulfilling marriage with my husband. So this woman is the ultimate cake eater. At least she wanted to be. That thought all came to an abrupt end one Thursday morning, 19 months ago. Now listen to what happens here. It was then that Steve and I were caught in bed at his house by Marcia's mother. So this guy's mother-in-law catches him in bed. She walked in on us while we were fully engaged and just started screaming obscenities. She first slapped and scratched Steve across the face, leaving a large gash with her nails. She also hit me square on the jaw and pulled out 2 handfuls of my hair before I could gather my clothes and get out of the house. So all this old mama bear, man, she was not playing around. She's saying, "You're not doing my daughter dirty, man. And this lady, you are a, and I'm going to rough you up." I'm not advocating violence here, but I can understand how angry this mother-in-law probably was. When I got back to my house, I was in total shock at what just happened, and the reality of what I had done had set in. I knew my fairy tale marriage to Jim was changed forever and could end because of this. I sat silent for a couple of hours, just staring at the walls, wondering what I was going to tell my husband. I then decided to call him and left an urgent message. "Yeah, what are you going to say?" "Oh, man." I said that I had something very important I needed to discuss. He didn't respond, so I texted him, and still nothing. At this point, I knew that Marcia or possibly even Steve had likely gotten to him. Well, listen, I can guarantee that Steve did not get to him. Steve, the cheater, was trying to avoid your husband. It more than likely was Marcia, or maybe Marcia's mother. A few minutes later, Marcia and her mother showed up on our front porch and started banging on the door and on the bay window, screaming for me to answer. I didn't. They were yelling obscenities and said they knew I was in there and to open up. I was scared beyond belief and thoroughly embarrassed. Thankfully, my boys were at school when this happened. They finally left, and I lay down on the couch crying. I fell asleep briefly and was awakened by the sound of a car door in the driveway. I looked out and saw my husband. I ran into the bathroom to splash my face and look into the mirror before going back into the living room to greet him when he opened the door. But he didn't enter. Instead, I saw out the window that he was walking down the street towards Steve and Marcia's house. I watched him as he walked down there and entered, where he stayed nearly 3 hours before coming home. So I wonder what Jim was doing down there with Marcia. When he came home, I went to hug him, and he just kept me away. I then started apologizing, and he said that my apology was not accepted, and he wanted me to leave. Now, I fell to the floor crying and begging, and told him I didn't want to go, but he insisted. You notice how in all these stories, the women always go to their knees and start being subservient and begging. It's just like a ploy. It's like a standard ploy from their playbook. He then called my mother on the phone and told her what I'd done and asked her to come over and pick me up. Mom came over. When she arrived, she apologized to Steve and forcibly convinced me to go back to her house for the night. She then helped me pack some clothes, and I left crying, asking Jim what he was going to tell the kids. He said he would take care of it, and I left brokenhearted and ashamed. Well, I applaud the husband here for saying, "Hey, I'm going to talk to the kids because I think the kids deserve to know." Now, they are young, so he has to handle this the appropriate way. But I think it's important for him to tell them truthfully what is going on and what happened. That night, I called Jim, and to my surprise, he answered. When he did, he just said, "Hello," and went silent. I told him it was me, and that I was so sorry, and that I would never do something like this again. I also told him that I will spend the rest of my life making it up to him. Jim said nothing, and just asked me if I had anything more to say. I said no, and asked him what he was feeling. He told me, "You know what I'm feeling," and I started crying. He then said he wanted me to stay at my parents' house for a couple of weeks before I came home. I reluctantly agreed, but asked when I would get to see him and the boys again. He said he doesn't want to see me now, but agreed to have a brief call with me every evening at Ninos. We ended that first call with me saying, "I love you," and Jim saying nothing, just hanging up. Well, what did you expect him to say? "Oh, I love you too," after you just cheated on the guy? Come on. Our call the following night went the same, with me apologizing and Jim being silent until I quit talking. He then told me that he wants a divorce. Good move, Jim. Hearing this, I melted and begged him for another chance. He refused and said he knows he'll lose half his hard-earned assets. Then, in the next breath, he said he'd give me everything he owns if I just disappear and leave him and the boys alone. So this guy, at that point in time, is thinking, I just want to get this woman out of our lives. I broke down and told him, "You don't mean that, Jim." And he said, "Yes, he does." We ended the call, and I cried all night. I then started thinking of what I could do to make him stay, and came up with a plan to offer him a postnuptial agreement that would be so favorable he couldn't refuse it. All I wanted was to get a second chance to prove my love to him, no matter what the cost. The following week, while Jim was meeting with his divorce attorney, I was meeting with a divorce attorney myself. Not to prepare for divorce, but to create a postnuptial agreement to present to Jim before I received the divorce papers. I went to 4 different attorneys before I found one who specialized in postnuptial agreements and who was willing to create such a lopsided agreement. Lopsided in that my husband would receive nearly all the benefit in exchange for remaining married to me for a period of time, thus giving me a second chance at love. Unfortunately, Jim's attorney completed the divorce papers in just 11 days, and I was served at my parents' house 2 days later. I had Jim served with a proposed postnuptial agreement. We talked that night after he read the proposal. He was a little surprised at what I had to offer, and for the first time, I could sense the caring person I once knew coming through, not the angry man who had been so robotic and cold for the past 2 weeks. Well, how did you expect him to be warm and loving financially and personally? The agreement is a complete and total win for Jim, and an opportunity for me to prove to him I'm worth keeping. I'm not going to get too specific on what the postnuptial contains, but I will confirm that it does enable Jim to keep nearly all of our marital assets if we stay married and living together for at least 30 months. Additionally, if I were ever to be unfaithful again and we divorce, I lose all claims on our marital assets. I get nothing and forego any alimony and child support payments. The agreement also calls for me to get a full-time job within the next 6 months and begin contributing to an appropriate share of our household expenses. Finally, my husband can see other women if he chooses throughout the remainder of our marriage. So she's offering him an open marriage. I know Jim would never be unfaithful. It's not in him. But I want him to know I love him enough to give him this option. No, the reason why you're putting it in there is because, like you said, you know that's not him and he's never going to be unfaithful. So you have no risk there. Don't try to fool us. To my surprise and delight, Jim accepted the offer with one additional stipulation. Jim, what are you doing? You need to divorce this woman. The clause Jim wanted added stated there is no requirement for us to sleep together or to have any type of marital intimacy during the remainder of our marriage. I was saddened and hesitant to agree to this, but finally did as I felt with time I would win back his respect, trust, and passionate love. Things have not gone as I thought, and that's why I'm here. We are now 17 and a half months into our second marriage, as I call it, and our relationship is one of being housemates, raising our boys. Don't get me wrong, I thank God every day for the second chance I've been given. But what we have wouldn't qualify as a marriage. It's more like we are two divorced people cohabitating. Since my affair, Jim has shown absolutely no affection towards me whatsoever. And I mean nothing, not even a kiss or a hug. So she's saying in 17 and a half months, this guy has totally avoided any contact with her, any physical contact, even something so innocent as a kiss or a hug. He won't even let me near him to express any type of affection. Although I do get in for a hug and a kiss occasionally before he can block me. But I can tell he doesn't like it, so I don't do it very often. Even so, now listen, the old Jim here, even so, he requires me to submit monthly to at-home STD testing. So even though he's not touching her, he's saying, "Woman, I don't trust you, so therefore I want you tested every month for STDs." Oh, wow, man. Also, since the affair, Jim will not go out in public with me, even to family events. Well, he's embarrassed of you. He's ashamed. When our boys have games, we alternate who takes them. When it's my turn, Jim shows up at the games, but doesn't sit with me. Instead, he normally stands on the sidelines with other fathers and acts like I'm not there. The things have changed much in their world. Jim does the same. He's good friends with all the neighborhood men. The guys are either over at our house smoking cigars and sipping bourbon at night on our back porch, or he's at one of their homes. So, these guys just like hanging out after work and relaxing. Jim basically goes to work, then to the gym, and then comes home. He fixes himself something to eat, and then it's off to a game or practice, or he's socializing with friends. He doesn't eat dinner with us, and will not eat anything I make anymore, although he did sneak a few cookies I made the other day. On the weekends, he fires up the grill and only eats what he cooks, none of my dishes. So, this guy doesn't even want to eat any food that she's preparing. The weekday dinners I have with my boys have been a great bonding experience for us. They like to eat shortly after getting home from school, so the three of us normally have dinner around 4:00. I have everything prepared, and they set the table, help me with final food prep, then help clean up after dinner. I cherish this time as it has really brought us closer and has taught them valuable skills. Well, that's good. I mean, having dinner together like a family. Although your husband should be there as well. That's a good thing, and teaching them how to cook and how to clean up and giving them that discipline. I applaud you for that. They even help me in the garden where we have created an awesome space in our backyard with landscaping. So, in summary, some things in my life are really great, while some aspects are just awful. I guess this is just a long way for me to ask whether you think this marriage is worth continuing as is, or if I should just let Jim go now and give him the financial benefit as if he'd stayed with me. I know deep down he's not happy. How could he be? It's clear he no longer views me as his wife or lover, just as a co-parent, which we are both great at, by the way. I love Jim so much and will carry the burden of what I did to him for the rest of my life. I want nothing more than to get back to the loving relationship with him I once had, but I don't think he will ever let us go there. See, now she's blaming him again. She's saying, I don't think he will ever let us go there. Let me know what you think I should do. I'd really appreciate any suggestions anyone has for how I could successfully earn back the love and trust of my husband after betraying him so brazenly. Thank you, Amy. Amy, let me tell you something. You're never going to win back his trust. I don't care what you do. The trust will never come back, and the love he still has for you is different now than it was previously, and it's never going to be the same. Therefore, my recommendation to both you and Jim is to divorce, go your separate ways, and rebuild your lives. That would be the best thing for you, your husband, and for your children. Okay, now let's take a look at a few responses that she got from the community. But before we do, I want to remind you, if you are liking what you hear so far, hit that like button. That will help get this video seen by people all over the world. Now let's take a look at some of these responses that she received. The first one's from a woman. She says, Amy, I think in your case, what will draw your husband back to you is distance. You should stay married but separate for a while. Rent an apartment somewhere nearby so you can still have that quality time with your boys. As they say, distance makes the heart grow fonder. And I think Jim will quickly realize this. I do hope you work things out as you seem so well matched. Well, I don't think they seem so well matched. I think they're opposites, to be honest with you. The next response is from a man. He says, if you really love your man as you say, you will set him free and allow him to keep the majority of the fortune he built. You've already taken his pride and dignity and destroyed his soul. Isn't that enough for you? He'll never trust you again because you are untrustworthy. If another Charles or Steve crosses your path in the future, you'll do the same damn thing. Well, I have to agree with this guy because she's obviously got a type of guy that she is just attracted to. And as she said herself, she admitted it's like a feral attraction, like a wild animal. She's not going to be able to resist it. The next response is from a woman. She says, it's clear that you are physically attracted to a certain type of man and are mentally attracted to a certain type of man, with Charles and Steve being the former, her and Jim the latter. In your 20s and 30s, that physical attraction is much more powerful. But I assure you, in time, the mental attractiveness and love of a good man like Jim is far more important. Hang on to him. So this woman sounds like she speaks from experience here. And the final response is from a guy. He says, women like you are the reason I've not yet married. It amazes me how you can go for years being a loyal wife and then immediately hop in the sack with any strange man that gets your juices flowing. I just don't understand this. I encounter beautiful women all the time, but I would never think of doing anything with them because I'm in a relationship with my girlfriend. Good grief. And now for the updates. And she's got two updates here. She's got an interim update, and then she has a final update. So we can see how everything turned out. So her first update, here comes, weeks after her original post. She says, I've come back to give an update on my situation. Last month, I took the advice that a number of you gave me and decided to move out of the house for a while to give our marriage some space. I got a short-term rental on a nice furnished apartment nearby and have been living there ever since. While I miss not being in the same house as my husband and my boys and miss my gardens, it has been a relief getting out of that neighborhood. There are just so many terrible memories and bad vibes there, all of which I know are my fault. I'm not excusing it anyway, what I caused. When I broke the news to Jim of my decision, he seemed surprised and a little sad and asked a lot of questions. His reaction told me a lot. It told me that he still loves me. I saw it in his eyes. I pick up my boys after school and they come over here and eat dinner with me and spend the night a few days a week. Jim and I are flexible on that, and the kids know they can come and go as they please at either place. The real issue I have now is that since I'm out of the house, I don't get to see Jim much at all, nor am I in a position where I get to talk to him. So I end up calling him, asking him stupid questions multiple times a week just so we can keep in touch. We've had a number of long conversation sessions about everything and nothing at all recently, which is another indication that the man still loves me. I know I love him. That's all for now. Thanks and take care. And again, we have another situation here where this woman, the cheater, is slowly reeling the guy back in. You can see him starting to break down. He was sad that she moved out, and now he's talking to her, having long conversations on the phone. Be strong, Jim. Be strong. Now, for the final update. And this final update came 5 months after the update we just reviewed. She says, I've delayed coming back to update as I wanted to give time to enable me to provide a complete perspective to my situation. What a journey. Talk about a roller coaster. Life definitely has its ups and downs. First, the downside. After 2 years into our second marriage, Jim decided that it would be best for us to divorce. Now, what she's talking about here when she's referring to her second marriage is since they put that postnuptial agreement in place. Jim said, while he still loves me and would like to possibly reestablish a romantic relationship at some point in the future, he just can't do it while we're married. I don't understand what he means, but he explained it's something psychological. He said, while we're still married, he feels disrespected and betrayed. But after we divorce, he thinks he can let those feelings go. Well, that's because if he remains tethered to you under marriage, then he's going to feel disrespected. He's going to feel less than. He's going to feel embarrassed. He's going to feel like he doesn't want that. A man wants to feel strong. Whereas if he divorces you now, all of a sudden, he takes back all of the power. And if he decides to date you every once in a while or even treat you like a friends with benefits, he's now in control of that relationship. He said it would be like dating again and promised me we would go out to celebrate our divorce the day it's final and possibly spend the night. I know this sounds like a crazy ploy to divorce me without guilt on his part, but I'm up for it if it means I can keep this man in my life as my partner, lover, and friend. If we do reconnect, Jim made it clear we will never get remarried. Well, good, Jim, because you were worrying me there for a while. He feels if we truly love each other, a binding contract isn't necessary. I agree with that statement, but I do wish there was some way he could do this without divorcing me. As for the divorce, I'm voluntarily letting him keep 3/4 of our marital assets, even though he didn't fulfill the stipulations of the post. Now, I'm also not going to pursue alimony or child support from him. Well, okay, now I've got to hand it to her. If she really is going to do that, which I don't know if I believe it or not, but let's just take her for her word. She is being fair to her husband in this divorce. I know there are women out there who are going to read this and chide me for being so giving, but I feel he earned the money and would have given all of his fortune to me if I had remained faithful to him. I'm at peace with this decision. Listen to this now. She says, even with a reduced settlement, I'll be able to live comfortably for the next 8 years or more without working. But now I am working, so I'm in even better shape there. So he obviously had built up a good nest egg for them. This lady was stupid. I mean, cheating on this guy with some dude that works at an auto dealership in finance. I mean, I'm not downplaying that job, but obviously she was married to a high-value guy, and to put that all at risk for just the thrill. Man, how stupid this woman has to be kicking herself even today. In closing, I just want to thank those who sent me responses. You don't know how much your words guided my actions and helped me through this trying time. Before I sign off here, I wanted to give some advice to women out there who have difficulty controlling temptation, as I obviously do. My advice to you is resist. Don't do it. The thrill is not worth the risk. It's almost like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. As the saying goes, if you feel you can't keep yourself in check, seek professional help. I can assure you from experience, the short-term high is not worth the long-term loss of love, respect, trust. My best to all of you, Amy. So that's her story, and I thought it was a great story. And I'm really glad how this turned out. I mean, the fact that this Jim remained in that marriage with her, and it was a miserable existence. He wasn't touching. He wouldn't eat any of the food that she made. He wouldn't go out in public with her. That's no way to live. Why didn't he just cut it off? He was looking probably financially like, oh yeah, if I stick it out with her for, whatever that time frame that she had in there, I think it was 30 months or 36 months. I'm going to keep 25% more of my fortune, which obviously was a lot of money according to what she said. But I'll tell you what, money is not worth giving up your happiness for. So let's take a look at some of the morals of this story. And there were a ton in here, but I just picked out 4 key ones that I thought were good takeaways. The first one, when a woman truly desires a man, she will move mountains to get him and do everything to please him. Remember that. There's very little work that the man has to do in that case. Okay? She is going to pursue him aggressively if she really wants him. Next, if you had to work hard to get her, you're probably not her first choice. Remember that, guys. If you had to date this woman and take her here, take her there, buy her this, buy her there, and she's not giving you all the good stuff and she's making you wait months and months, chances are you're not her first choice. If you were not her first choice, it is logical that the chances she will cheat would be higher. There's no question about that. I haven't seen any studies to that extent, but it just makes logical sense, right? And then finally, it's best to divorce and provide your kids with 2 happy homes versus staying together in a miserable one. I said that on the last video too. Don't stay in that environment because your kids are witnessing what's going on and they're saying, oh, you know what? Marriage is just miserable. Dad and mom really not liking each other and mom cheated on dad. You don't want your kids to go through that mess. So those are my thoughts on this story. Now I want to hear from you.